If you're an executive and heard about Scrum, this is the place for you. This is going to be a brief overview of what it is, why we have it, where it came from, and the benefits of it. My wife always says Scrum sounds too much like scum, so why would anyone want to be the master of it? She's not wrong, but it is a very useful framework for building software applications. You can even use it for non-technical projects as well. So here's a dive into what Scrum is, the benefits, and how you can use it in your projects. All right, here we are in Figma, and I will include the prompt that I used to create this. I didn't write any of this. I just added a prompt. I did a speech to text, and here we are. So this is a brief overview of Scrum. I included some things that I wanted to describe in this video. So first of all, what is Scrum? Scrum is an agile framework for developing software. Where does the name come from? Well, if you've ever watched rugby, when they need to do like a throw in, they'll have a scrum where both teams go at each other like that and they kick the ball through underneath after it's thrown in, and all sorts of crazy shenanigans go on during the scrum. And that's where Scrum gets its name. It's not an acronym. It's purely from rugby. So the principle of that is we have a daily stand-up, or sometimes called the Scrum meeting, that is no more than 15 minutes long. And we talk about what we worked on yesterday, what we're working on today, and if we have any blockers. That's it. Each team member goes through that. If it's more than 15 minutes, you're doing it wrong. So that's the super brief overview of Scrum. It's to help provide visibility to the business and help remove blockers. Developers hate meetings, so that's why it's only 15 minutes long. If they could avoid those, they would. A really good developer wants to just write code. So let's let them do that. I won't read this. I'll include a link in the description, but it's an iterative process to develop software or get any project done. One of the core tenets of Scrum is self-organizing teams. This is very important because that gets the business out of the way. If I am the business, or you as a CTO, if I go in and say, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, well, maybe that's not the best division of labor. Maybe that's not going to get our software project done quicker. We have to assume good intent and assume that these people on our team know what they're doing. And if they don't, you hired the wrong people. But chances are they do, and they want to get stuff done. They want to build a good product. So their roles here, the three roles are product owner. That would be the business representation for the project. That is the lead business representative to help make sure that the team is getting the right functions done or right functionality in the application. The second thing is a Scrum Master. Scrum Master doesn't really make any decisions. The Scrum Master facilitates the various meetings and helps the team decide on what they should do. Helps meaning they facilitate that decision-making process. Then the third role is the development team. That includes designers, QA, engineers, back-end, front-end developers, anyone who works on building or making sure that the quality is done in the software project. All right, now artifacts. We've got the backlog and the sprint backlog. So we have product backlog. This is normally just called the backlog. And then the sprint backlog, that's just called the sprint. And then the product increment. So one of the other tenets of Scrum is, since it's an iterative process, we release at the end of each sprint. Most sprints are 2 weeks long. That's what I recommend whenever I go to a new team or a new project. 1 week, you can't get enough stuff done. 3 weeks, sometimes you get off cadence, and there are some things that you could be doing in 2 weeks versus 3 weeks. And then there are events. There's the sprint planning. So what you'll do in sprint planning is you'll take the backlog, all the different stories you have listed, and you'll put those into a sprint. During the sprint planning, you'll commit to those stories in the sprint. The whole team will say, yes, this is what we can get done. And if someone gets blocked, or if we find that we're not making enough progress, we'll swarm on an issue and try to get that resolved quicker than if someone was doing it on their own. So that's sprint planning. Daily stand-up, we talked about that. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And any blockers. That's it. We don't go into technical discussions. We don't say, let's stop the sprint and now we'll have a technical meeting. No, we don't do that. If two people need to meet, they will go meet on their own. Then the third meeting is a sprint review. That will include a demo of what we've been working on. Sometimes the demo is just running through unit tests. Or sometimes we're digging into the database, or we're saying, well, here's what we worked on, but we don't have anything to show for you yet. And the reason for that is a lot of times at the beginning of a project, we'll have some framework that we're building. We have a lot of infrastructure. We can say, oh, we can log in, but we don't have a UI yet. So here's our postman, and we'll do a login. And here's our username and password. We logged in. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom. And then the last event is a sprint retrospective. A sprint retrospective is where the team discusses what went well, what didn't go well. Basically, it's what do we want to keep doing, what do we want to stop doing, and what do we want to start doing? Those are three great questions to ask the team. And then from that, we can kind of adjust. Every 2 weeks, we're adjusting. We're incrementally improving as a team. We're incrementally releasing software, and everything goes much smoother. And it's important to note that a sprint retrospective is only the Scrum Master and the development team. The product owner is not welcome to that meeting, because there needs to be a space where if we're having issues with the product owner, the team needs to be able to discuss that. And the product owner can't have visibility into what the development team is trying to, what challenges they're facing, because it's not the product owner's job to dictate how the team should run. It's kind of a different shift of power. And power is probably the wrong word, maybe control or focus, because as a top-down organization, that's not going to work. So you need to relinquish control and try to provide influence for your dev team. So here's some core values here. Here are the roles in greater detail. All right, here are the artifacts. We talked about those. On the ceremonies, this even has a breakdown into the time, so that's nice. Stand up 15 minutes. It should not ever go over 15 minutes. I cannot reiterate that enough. If you have a very large team and it takes you 20 minutes to go through everyone, you need to split that up into 2 different groups, and they can focus on different aspects of the application. And then if you have 2 different Scrum groups, then you can have like a Scrum of Scrums, where just one key stakeholder from each of those goes to a meeting with a common Scrum Master or something like that. It sounds like a little bit of overhead, but it's not much, because then you just coordinate. Sometimes there will be some reuse in the software that you can do between the 2 teams. So it's really quite effective. Sprint planning. It shouldn't take 4 to 8 hours. It just shouldn't. Sprint planning should take an hour or 2. Let's see what else. Sprint review. Again, 1 to 2 hours. A retrospective, 1 hour, really. Like, you don't need to spend 3 hours on a retrospective. One thing that is missing here is backlog refinement. So that's another meeting that takes, at first it'll take a little bit of time, but it usually lasts half hour to an hour. And you can do that maybe once a week, once every other week as you get rolling. But the sprint backlog refinement is before sprint planning. So what you do in that situation is you'll go through each user story, and you will talk about what the complexities are with it. You'll point each story, and that gives you a little bit of an estimation of how complex that task is. And in most teams, I've used the Fibonacci sequence, and that is a numbering system where everything's almost double. So you go 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. And anything above 13, you need to split off into multiple stories. The reason for that is software is very complex and very difficult to estimate. So by doubling it every time, then you can say, all right, well, this is almost twice as complex as this thing. So a 1 would be a typo, things like that. Most things fall into 3 to 5 points. So if it's very simple, it'll be a 1 or a 2. And then 3 is, something that's got a little more meat on its bones. And number 5 will be, that has some complexity, and I try to avoid mapping that to time, because we want to be vague. And here's why. If we map it to time, then we're estimating the time in our head instead of estimating the complexity. We're not good at estimating how long something will take. We're good at estimating how complex something is. So keep that in mind as you do that. I will add the backlog refinement here. Sprint flow. So here is our sprint. So here's our sprint planning. They kind of combine this with backlog refinement. So we might have a slightly different diagram for the final. I'll include a link in the description. So we have our sprint goal and the backlog items that are in there, and then we task it out. That can be done offline. We don't need everyone to task it. There are certain things like cross-cutting concerns that we will want to have a task for each thing. For instance, QA, a lot of times we'll either use a sprint lane that has QA, or we will put a task of QA on each story. It depends on what software you're using and if you use tasks or if you keep everything a story. And then this estimate is points. And then each sprint, what we'll do is we'll have the stand-up. Developers will go do their thing. QA will do their thing. And we have code reviews. Now, a code review is a great way for the team to make sure that we're not duplicating code. We can also ensure that we're writing clean code. And that is done through a pull request through GitHub or whatever Git-based repository you're using for your source code. Then we have a sprint review, demo to stakeholders, and we have some feedback, and then we update the product backlog for the next sprint. All right, we have the retrospective. We talked about that a little bit. And there are some times when you're going to want to have maybe a shorter sprint, sometimes a sprint zero when you're first starting off a project. You have a lot of unknowns. So you're going to say, all right, well, we need to integrate with our ERP system. Let's have a spike, which means we'll time box it. We'll spend 4 hours and we'll research their API and see what we can do with it. So we'll have a bunch of we'll have like a spike sprint, call it a sprint zero. Everything's time boxed. So that is time based. We'll say 4 hours for this, 2 hours for that, an hour for this. We have a lot of back and forth between various people in business. So that one will be an anomaly. All right. Another thing about being collaborative, I have teams in Slack and stuff like that. That's really good use of communication, a communication channel for the team. If someone's stuck on something, they can just pop in there and say, hey, Scrum Master, I'm blocked with this. If they want to do that before the next stand-up, which is always a good idea to be proactive on that. All right, sprint planning process. So we talked about that. I'll let you read through it because I know you can read. I can read. I don't need someone reading to me. Neither do you. So here are the sprint length options. So a 1 week sprint to me is like a sprint zero. I don't agree with the planning hours. I think they're overestimated. A 2 week sprint planning, 2 week sprint. That's what I've done for as long as I've been using Scrum. I've been using 2 week sprints. The reason for that is 1 week is too short. There's too many artifacts, too many meetings. You don't really want to have that many meetings for just 3 days worth of work. It seems like you have your end caps, which are your sprint review and your sprint planning. You can kind of do it on the same day, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So then you've got 3 days to do work. This one, you have 5 days to do, 8 days to do work, 3 plus the 5. So that makes it a little bit better. Doing 3 or 4 week sprints, what happens is it kind of loses momentum as soon as you go into 3 or 4 weeks. So keep it 2 weeks. That's my recommendation. I'm not a one size fits all except for this. That's pretty much a one size fits all. So here it talks about sprint zero, setup and prep, and then a spike sprint. That's pretty good. Hardening sprint. This would be bug fixes. I would always call it a bug fix sprint, but hardening is a much better way to do it. So you want to make sure that your app is done right. You are shipping high quality code. That is your hardening sprint. Then don't plan more than 80% of the team's capacity. This gives you a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that you can achieve your goals. It's not about, so someone could be 20% lazy. It's more of there are unknowns, there are meetings, things like that. You should see movement in the board every day, every single day. All right, so let's go over waterfall. I remember I worked for a large DoD contractor here in the US. If I mentioned the name, you would definitely have heard of them. It seemed like a total waste of time because we did waterfall and it was all about butts in the seats. It wasn't about delivering software. It was about, we've got, a lot of hours we've got to burn out. Let's burn through those hours. And that's kind of a weird mentality to me. I like to get stuff done. One of the things was they wanted to know the attrition between a group going through some courses and stuff like that. Okay, well, I can figure that out if you give me some numbers. I did a little bit of algebra, figured it out in 20 minutes. And they said, okay, now let's write a little tool on that and we'll simulate that and we'll show a graph of our students and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, that was kind of pointless. But that's kind of what waterfall is. So you start with requirements, then you do design, then you write the code, then you test it, then you deploy it. That can take like 6 months or a year. So as you do that, you're not getting feedback from anyone. Think of why we did it that way. Well, we didn't have high-speed internet like we do now. We had everything was slow because the computers were slow, networks were slow, and we didn't really know what we didn't know about software development. It was still brand new. So it makes sense back then. Today, we don't need to do that anymore. You can go serverless. You don't have a big server room you have to set up. So here we have, an example of sprints and some characteristics of each. I'll let you review that on your own. Low flexibility. That's what it is right there. Risk. These two, the flexibility and the risk, that's 100% why we do an Agile methodology now instead of waterfall. All right, a typical user story. As a blank, I need blank, so that blank. So here's an example. Here, they wrote one here. As a customer, I need to add items to my shopping cart so they can purchase multiple products in a single transaction. That's a great user story. As a user, registered user or user, I guess registered mean they're authenticated. So that's a good differentiating factor. I need to reset my password so I can regain access to my account if I forget it. As a customer, blah, blah, blah. You see the pattern here. One thing that this doesn't include is the definition of done. So that's one of the first things you do on a new project is you define the definition of done. Here's where your cross-cutting concerns come into place. Security will be in one of those for authentication, authorization. Authentication is we know who the user is. Authorization, yeah. And authorization is what they can do. What role are they in or what claims do they have, things like that. QA will be a definition of done. A code review will be a definition of done. Sometimes 80% unit tests will be a definition of done. Those are all good things to have in your sprint. So I didn't focus on any tools. The two main tools people like to use are Jira and Azure DevOps. One thing I like about Azure DevOps is you can use that for your stories. You can have a wiki. You can have your GitHub repo in there, and it's all combined. Jira, you can also integrate with GitHub. And then you can have Confluence, which is made by Atlassian as well. Both great tools. It doesn't really matter the tool. I'll probably go through both of these and try to contrast and compare what the benefits of each one are. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you follow Scrum or Kanban is another flavor of Agile. I can go through that in a future video. But you have an iterative process. Every 2 weeks, you're shipping code. Every 2 weeks, you're shipping software, actually. You're not shipping code. You're writing code that creates software. This helps you get certain things into place like CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and you'll have a much better product. Okay, I hope you found this video valuable. Let me know what you thought of it. What do you want on a future video? As always, subscribe to the video. If you want any help with your Scrum implementation or you want to pick my brain, there's a link in the description below. Book a 15-minute call with me. I'd love to help you out. And I'll see you again next time.